Picture yourself on a quiet night, long ago. The World War was over, and the lights came back on soft and yellow. Everyone was ready to breathe easy and dream sweet dreams. But a new kind of darkness began to grow, not from fire or armies, but from deep inside the hearts of men. This darkness was fear, a soft, cold, invisible fog that crept over the land. It made people look up at the sky and wonder if the stars were safe, or if something silent and terrible was waiting to drop. Tonight we will drift into this hidden force. We will learn how anxiety became the biggest enemy, and how brave minds found peace in the quiet shadows. Rest your mind now and let the gentle story begin. First, fear in quiet cities. Long, long ago, when early people lived in deep caves, they saw the very first ancient glow. Maybe it was a fire, or a symbol painted on the stone wall. This light felt safe and warm. It pushed back the big, scary blackness outside. This was the first time humans understood the simple meaning of light. It meant protection, knowledge, and home. But then, fast forward many, many years, the big cities of the world were full of lights, but the people did not feel safe anymore. A new kind of darkness was coming, a shadow that no lamp could touch. This shadow was called the Cold War. It was not a fight of loud guns, but a quiet war of minds and fear. The first fear came not from a bomb, but from a whisper in the silent night. This new tension made every light feel fragile, like a small, weak candle in a huge wind. This strange, cold time began just after the second very big war ended. Two giant friends, the United States and the Soviet Union, stopped being friends. They looked at each other with deep suspicion. Each country had a different idea about how the world should work. One liked freedom and lots of choices, and the other liked control and one strong boss. They did not trust each other even a little bit. They started making bigger and bigger toys, not trucks or dolls, but powerful weapons that could make a city vanish. The leaders spoke kind words in the sun, but their hands were building dark secrets underground. This hidden fight was named Cold, because the two giants never actually fired their biggest guns at each other. Instead, they froze the whole world with anxiety and waiting. What did this long, cold time truly mean for people? It meant that the sky was no longer friendly. Before, the sky held soft clouds and gentle rain. Now, it held rockets and the promise of a fast, awful flash. People felt a psychological dread, a hidden force all around them. They built secret shelters in their backyards, hoping a little concrete could hold back the impossible. This fear was not like being scared of a bear. It was being scared of everything and nothing all at once. It changed how parents talked to their children, how they planned for tomorrow, or even if they planned for tomorrow at all. The meaning of a life itself became small and precious, held in a shaky hand. The start of this silent conflict shows us something very important about people. It shows us that fear can be a powerful weapon all by itself. When people are told to fear an unseen enemy, their own minds start to work against them. They look at their neighbours and wonder, is he one of them? This suspicion divided towns, churches, and even families. The war was won not just by countries, but by the quiet choices people made every day. Who to trust, what to say, and where to hide their own private anxiety. It teaches us that peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of trust and a feeling of calm. This time of great quiet fear has a small link to the glowing toy we talked about in the last story. That toy was safe in the child's hand, but this new fear made even simple toys feel fragile. Today, we may not fear a huge silent bomb, but we still feel a rush of digital anxiety when we see bad news. We still feel the power of an invisible enemy that lives in our phones and our headlines. The Cold War mindset gave us the word existential dread, the big quiet fear that the world could end even on a sunny day. We learned to live with a background noise of fear, and that noise is still echoing in our hearts. Now, let your shoulders drop and your breath slow down. Remember that even when the biggest world powers were frozen in fear, the simple things of a life kept going. Flowers grew, children laughed, and the moon still came up in the quiet night. The human spirit is stronger than any big bomb or hidden fear. We found ways to be kind, to share secrets, and to find comfort in the smallest, simplest glow. You're safe now. Let the gentle history of the first fear lead you softly into a deeper, restful sleep. Cities that vanished at night. Long ago, there were real lost cities that simply vanished. Maybe the river changed its path, or the sand covered the stone. But in the time of the Cold War, a new kind of city could vanish, not under sand, but under a sudden, terrible flash. The cities did not disappear slowly. They were suddenly thought of as fragile, ready to be gone in a moment of dread. This idea made people feel weak, like they were living in a glass house waiting for a rock. The psychological impact was immense. If your home could be gone in one breath, where was your true safety? This deep feeling of uncertainty became a constant heavy blanket over the world, even on the brightest day. These fears were not just stories. They were rooted in real places that showed the sudden divide. Think of Berlin, a real city split down the middle by a huge, ugly wall. One side was quiet and controlled, the other was loud and free. Overnight, friends and families were cut off, unable to touch or speak. This physical separation showed the world how easily people could be separated by political ideas. The wall itself became a powerful symbol of the Cold War mind. Hard, cold, and based on deep fixed suspicion. It was a reminder that trust had vanished, and fear was now the new, strict ruler of the landscape. The people living near this great wall learned to live with a constant sense of danger. Every noise after dark was a question. Is it safe? Every stranger was a mystery. Friend or foe? This required great inner strength just to go to the market or plant a garden. They did not have the luxury of a gentle dream. They had to be alert, using their minds as their own personal shield. They taught their children to be very careful, to speak in soft voices, and to never ask too many questions. This was the silent emotional cost of the cities that were ready to vanish at any time. What this teaches us is how quickly a sense of community can break down when trust is removed. When people are told that the person next door might be an agent for the enemy, the warm feeling of belonging turns cold. This is the fragile mind at its core. The moment you begin to question the goodness of your neighbour, the fear was designed to make people isolate themselves, to trust only the great power of the state. It was a war against human connection, trying to make the individual mind small and afraid. In the last story, we talked about the first ancient glow of safety in the caves. This memory of simple light is important now because these vanished cities needed that light more than ever. The people kept their ancient glow alive with secret kindnesses, passing quiet notes, or sharing a little extra bread. They found ways to connect across the vast, cold emptiness of the political divide. These small acts of defiance against the vastness of the fear were what truly saved the soul of the cities. Take a slow, quiet breath now. The physical wall is gone, but the lesson stays with us. Never let a wall grow in your own heart. Never let the fear of a vanished future stop you from living brightly today. Let the memory of those brave people who kept their kindness alive through the cold guide your mind toward a deep, peaceful rest. Simple symbols for secret codes. Before people could write long letters, they used simple symbols carved in stone to share big ideas. A spiral meant the sun, a wavy line meant water. These symbols were honest and easy to understand. But in the Cold War, symbols became tricky. They turned into secret codes and hidden meanings. Because people could not speak openly about their worries, or even their hopes, they learned to whisper things in ways only others who felt the same way could understand. A simple flower in a window might mean, I am safe. A specific song played quietly might mean, I am waiting. The two great powers also used symbols, but theirs were much louder. They used flags and statues that were too big and too bold. These were not for whispering secrets. They were for shouting power and control. They were symbols of division, meant to tell people, this is my side, and that is the enemy's side. The giant statues and the loud parades were trying to push a single thought into everyone's mind, that their side was the only one that mattered. This battle of symbols, the quiet secret ones versus the loud proud ones, was a huge part of the psychological war. In the world of espionage and spies, the codes became a matter of life and death. A small mark on a newspaper could tell a spy where to meet. A certain colour umbrella could mean danger. These were not the simple, beautiful symbols of the Stone Age. They were cold, calculated language of suspicion. The mind had to be sharp and always awake, looking for hidden patterns in the ordinary. It trained people to see every simple object as having a double meaning. This constant need to decode the world made the mind very tired and kept the anxiety high. What this silent use of secret codes shows us is the deep human need to communicate, even when communication is dangerous. When open speech is taken away, the mind finds another way. It becomes creative and resilient. The simple symbols of the past remind us that true meaning doesn't need to be loud or complicated. It can be just a quiet line or a simple glow that only two people understand. This small act of shared understanding was a way to fight the vast cold isolation the war tried to create. Think back to the vanished cities from our last chapter. In those moments of separation, a small glowing rune, a symbol of ancient strength, might have been the only thing that kept hope alive. It wasn't the giant flag of an empire that brought comfort. It was the quiet, personal symbol held close to the heart. This is the difference between power that seeks to control and meaning that seeks to connect. Let us take a lesson from the simple, honest symbols of the past. Let your own thoughts be honest and clear, not hidden in sharp corners of worry. When your mind is quiet and your heart is steady, you do not need secret codes to feel safe. Rest now, and let your mind find the clearest, simplest symbol of peace to hold on to tonight. Quiet objects left by old hands. Before the great fears of the Cold War, people made things with their own hands. Tools, bowls, toys. These were quiet objects that had the warmth of the person who made them. They were simple and honest. But in the age of big, factory-made machines and the fear of vast hidden weapons, the everyday object changed. Suddenly, a simple thermos could be a spy camera. A pencil could hold a secret message. This paranoia meant that the ordinary things we hold dear became potential agents of fear. The mind had to relearn how to trust the fork in its hand or the book on the shelf. The most terrifying objects were the quiet weapons themselves, the nuclear bombs. They were objects of unbelievable power, yet often hidden deep underground, silent and still. They were waiting. The contrast between their simple, metallic shape and the vast existential dread they carried was unsettling. These quiet objects showed humanity that a small thing could contain enough power to wipe out all the beautiful handmade things in the world. This thought was heavy and kept the fragile mind awake at night, wondering about the things that are unseen. The objects that save people were also very quiet. Think of the simple radio. It was a small glowing box that brought voices from far away, sometimes from the side of the world that was supposed to be the enemy. These voices brought different music and different ideas, breaking through the official loud messages. The radio became a secret connection, a tool for escaping the tight mental control of the state. It was a quiet act of resistance, reminding people that the world was bigger and more complicated than their rulers told them. The history of these objects shows us the resilience of the human spirit. Even when surrounded by objects of fear, people instinctively sought out objects of comfort and connection. They cherished a worn-out photograph, a hand-stitched blanket, or a simple rock from a quiet river. These personal talismans held more emotional power than any massive, loud monument. They were a psychological anchor in a time when the whole world felt like it was floating away in fear. Our last chapter spoke of simple symbols that brought comfort across the Great Wall. Now we see how these symbols were often attached to quiet objects. A simple wooden doll could hold the hope of a parent. A piece of old, glowing pottery could represent the history that the rulers wanted to erase. This connection to the past, stored in silent things, gave people the quiet strength to face the uncertain future. It showed them that their own history was still real, no matter what loud news was broadcast. Let us let the quiet objects teach us tonight. Find the simple things in your room, the soft pillow, the warm blanket, and let their simple reality bring you peace. There is no secret, no hidden message, just soft comfort. Rest deeply and know that the most valuable things in life are often the most quiet. Easy tales of two big empires. The Cold War was like a long, complicated story, but we can tell it with easy tales of two big empires. Imagine two colossal giants, both very strong, standing on opposite sides of the world. One giant wore the colours of freedom and money, the other wore the colours of order and shared property. They could not agree on the rules for the playground. Each giant believed his way was the only right way, and that the other giant was wrong, maybe even evil. They spent all their time measuring their strength against each other, building higher walls and deeper trenches. This rivalry was the main source of the global anxiety that made the whole world tremble. These giants, the United States and the Soviet Union, tried to make their stories simple. In their movies and their school books, their side was always the hero, and the other side was always the dark villain. This was done to control the fragile mind of the citizen. If the story is simple, people do not have to think hard. They just have to fear the enemy. But real life is never so simple. There were good people and people making mistakes on both sides of the curtain. The emotional tension came from living inside a story that you knew was only half true, but you had to pretend to believe the whole thing. The way these big empires fought was often with proxies, like two boys making their smaller toys fight for them. This led to wars in distant places like Korea and Vietnam, where the true cost was paid by people who only wanted peace. These small, hot conflicts were where the global suspicion truly burned. They were the moments when the Cold War felt very hot indeed. The main giants never fought directly, but they watched each other with intense surveillance, waiting for the first sign of the weakness. This constant readiness to jump into the fire created a lasting atmosphere of high alert. What the tales of these empires show us is the power of a shared narrative. When a country can agree on a simple, dramatic story, we are the good, they are the bad, it creates powerful psychological unity. But this unity comes at a cost, the loss of personal doubt and complex thought. The Cold War forced millions of people to choose a side, even when they felt caught in the middle. It showed that ideological conflict can be more devastating to the mind than any physical battle. This connects to the quiet objects we discussed in the last chapter. While the giants were busy building huge, loud rockets, the people were finding comfort in their small, personal objects of meaning. They understood that the true battle for peace was not fought by the big empires, but by the individual minds who refused to let hate and fear take over their private lives. The soft glow of a simple rune was stronger than the loud voice of a giant. Let us close this chapter by reminding our minds that the time of those two giant empires is now a history story. The giants are quiet now, and the world is different. We can choose which stories to keep and which to let go. Choose the story of quiet strength and gentle wisdom. Rest your mind and let the loud tales of rivalry drift far away. Whisper, forgotten myths from long ago. Before modern times, people used myths to explain the big scary things they didn't understand, like thunder or death. These forgotten myths held wisdom about how to deal with existential dread. They taught lessons about heroes facing invisible monsters, or quiet magic that could restore the balance of the world. In the Cold War, the fear of the atomic bomb felt like a myth itself, a monster of our own making, too big and strange to be real. People started to whisper old stories again, seeking comfort in ancient words that had survived countless other dark ages. These stories were a way for the fragile mind to cope with the unbelievable. The myth of the bomb was incredibly powerful. It created a new kind of modern legend, the idea that the world could end in a single, silent moment. This new myth was used by both empires to keep their people in a state of controlled anxiety. They told stories of the enemy's terrible power, not to inform, but to inspire fear and loyalty. But away from the loud, official stories, people shared their own personal myths, tales of survival, quiet acts of bravery, and finding hope in the deepest darkness. These private stories were the true history of how the mind survived. For example, many cultures have myths about a quiet ruin or a sacred place where time moves slowly and fear cannot enter. During the height of the Cold War, people created their own quiet ruins. Maybe it was a small garden, or a secret room where they could read books that were not approved by the state. These places became their psychological refuges, sacred spots where the mind could finally rest, and the great loud fears could not follow. This spiritual resistance was essential for maintaining sanity during decades of high alert status. What the study of these myths shows us is that the human mind needs meaningful stories to face chaos. When the real world is terrifying, we turn to the eternal truths found in ancient tales. These myths remind us that fear has always been a part of life, and that humanity has always found a way to overcome it. They are a calm pattern in the storm of history, a gentle voice saying, "You are not the first to be afraid, and you will not be the last to be safe." This is a beautiful connection to the loud empires we talked about before. While the empires were telling loud, false hero myths, the people were quietly remembering the true ones, the myths of kindness and the power of the small person. They understood that the quiet ruin in their own backyard was a stronger defence than any distant wall or rocket. The true story of the Cold War is one of private mythology overcoming public paranoia. Let us use this moment to quiet our own modern anxieties. Your mind is like that quiet ruin, a place where you can keep your most precious thoughts safe. Close your eyes and remember a simple, gentle story from your own past. Let that comforting memory be the simple symbol that guides you now. Rest softly in the knowledge that your own inner peace is the oldest and strongest myth of all. Join stories from far lands. The giants of the Cold War tried to make everyone feel alone and separate. They wanted their people to only look inward. But the stories of fear and anxiety were felt everywhere. We must join stories from far lands to understand the true global cost of this tension. From a small village in Africa to a busy street in Japan, the shadow of the Cold War touched every shore. People in these places often didn't care about the big argument between the empires. They just wanted to live without the fear of being pulled into a fight that wasn't theirs. Their daily life became a delicate balance of trying to stay neutral and safe. The psychological warfare was truly global. The empires exported their fear, their spies and their weapons, creating regional conflicts that tested the limits of human endurance. For people in these far lands, the Cold War was not cold at all. It was very hot and very real. They had to navigate a landscape where they did not know which side to trust, or if anyone could be trusted at all. This led to a huge amount of collective stress and a deep feeling of powerlessness as their fate was decided in distant capitals. Yet, in these distant places, people also showed the greatest resilience. They held on to their own ancient traditions and cultural peace as a shield against the imported fear. A farmer in India or a fisherman in Chile knew the true value of a quiet sunset and a full harvest, things that the powerful empires seemed to forget. They understood that true strength lies not in big bombs, but in the simple rhythm of life. Their stories are important because they remind us that the Cold War mindset was not universal. It was a choice made by a few powerful people. What these collected stories show us is the universal human spirit against a single, powerful threat. No matter the language, the colour of the skin or the flag, the human heart reacts to fear in the same way, with vulnerability and a desperate search for comfort. But they also show us the powerful unity that can come from shared experience. When two strangers from different parts of the world realised they shared the same quiet fear, a small bridge of empathy was built. This shared story creates a gentle connection to the forgotten myths we whispered in the last chapter. The heroes in those myths were never alone. They always found a quiet ally in a far land. Similarly, the people living through the Cold War found allies not in treaties, but in the shared look of worry in a stranger's eyes. It was the simple, human recognition that broke through the walls of propaganda. Let your mind travel to those far lands now, not with worry, but with a sense of quiet solidarity. Realise that your own gentle desire for peace is part of a vast, enduring human wish. You're not alone in seeking rest and safety. Sleep peacefully now, knowing that the global wish for calm is stronger than the global shadow of the past. Look at calm patterns in the sky before the Cold War. The night sky was a source of ancient wonder and calm. People looked up and saw calm patterns in the sky, the constellations, the moon, the planets, which had been the same for thousands of years. They represented order and permanence, but when the Cold War started, the sky became a new frontier of fear. The empires launched the space race, which was not really about science. It was about showing who could build a faster rocket to carry a bomb. The first satellites, though small, introduced a chilling fact. The enemy could now look down on you from space, and the weapons could travel overhead without warning. The launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik in 1957 was a huge psychological shock to the West. It proved that the enemy was not just far away, they were circling the Earth above your head. This event made people feel vulnerable in a new, profound way. The sky was no longer a safe ceiling, it was a wide, open door for threat. This moment drove deep changes in education and science, fueled by national anxiety. The constant need to look up with a mix of awe and dread became a signature emotion of the Cold War era. The American response was to pour vast resources into the space program, creating the image of heroic astronauts and giant rockets. This was also a form of psychological defense. By showing they could reach the moon, they were trying to prove they were still superior and safe. This created a dual reality. The public saw glamorous heroes, but behind the scenes, the military competition for missile technology was intense. The fragile mind was constantly pulled between the excitement of scientific achievement and the terrifying reality of military escalation. What this teaches us is how easily a source of beauty can be turned into a source of fear. The calm patterns in the sky were replaced by the anxious movements of man-made objects. However, it also shows the power of focus. The intense collective ambition required to put a person on the moon was a profound demonstration of human capability. It offered a quiet hope that if humanity could achieve such impossible feats, perhaps it could also achieve lasting peace. This connection to the stories from far lands is clear. The space race made the world feel smaller. When pictures of the Earth from space arrived, showing a single, blue, borderless sphere, it quietly undermined the political divisions on the ground. This sense of unity from above offered a moment of quiet reflection, suggesting that the Empire's argument was small compared to the vastness of the cosmos. Let your mind look up at the calm patterns again. Even with all the satellites and the old threats, the stars are still there, steady and bright. Let that ancient cosmic order restore your own sense of balance. The sky is peaceful now, and your mind deserves the same deep, still rest. Sleep well. Feel hidden forces. All around. During the Cold War, it was easy to feel hidden forces all around. These were not ghosts or spirits, but the forces of paranoia and suspicion. Because the enemy was not a uniformed army, but a hidden ideology, anyone could be a threat. Your neighbour, your colleague, or even someone in your own family. This created a profound sense of psychological isolation. People became afraid to express a controversial opinion, to read the wrong book, or to even dream the wrong dream. This self-censorship was one of the most effective tools of the war, making people their own jailers. In the West, this fear led to the infamous McCarthyism in the 1950s, where simple accusations could ruin a person's life. People were asked to prove they were not communists, which is an impossible task. This witch hunt mentality showed the true fragility of trust in society. It taught people that sometimes the biggest threat to your safety comes not from a foreign enemy, but from the fear and anger of your own community. This period forced people to look inward and ask, what am I hiding? And what do they think I am hiding? On the eastern side, the hidden forces were the secret police and the constant surveillance. People had to assume that their phones were tapped, their letters were read, and their private conversations were being recorded. This created a culture of doublespeak, where people said one thing in public and believed another in private. The mind had to maintain two separate identities, which is incredibly stressful and tiring. The only safe place left was the deep, quiet centre of one's own thoughts, which could never truly be infiltrated. What these hidden forces show us is the human mind's natural tendency to seek patterns, even when those patterns are terrifying. When information is scarce and fear is high, the mind fills the gaps with conspiracy and doubt. This highlights the importance of truth and transparency for a peaceful mind. A society built on lies and suspicion is one that breeds deep, collective anxiety, even when nothing physical is happening. We connect this to the calm patterns in the sky from the last chapter. The beautiful, predictable order of the cosmos was replaced by the chaotic, unpredictable nature of human suspicion. But just as the stars still held their true course above the chaos, so too did the quiet, private integrity of many people remain steady beneath the surveillance. Their inner truth was the quiet ruin that could not be taken away. Let the feeling of paranoia and hidden forces fade now. Your space is safe and quiet. There are no watchers and no hidden codes. Let your mind become a clear, still pool where only honest thoughts can exist. Rest deeply in your own quiet truth. Mix truth and gentle myth. During the Cold War, it was hard to tell the difference between truth and gentle myth. The truth was often terrifying. Countries possessed enough bombs to end the world many times over. The myth was needed to make this truth bearable. People needed to believe a gentle myth, that their leaders were wise, that their side would surely win, and that the ultimate final disaster would somehow be avoided. This psychological coping mechanism was vital for millions of people to simply get out of bed in the morning and live a normal life. The ability to selectively ignore the worst reality was a quiet superpower. One powerful myth was the story of the heroic scientist who would invent a technology to save everyone. This myth was heavily promoted by governments to inspire false hope and distract from the terror of the weapons they were also building. The truth was that many of the smartest scientists were the ones who were most afraid, fully understanding the terrible forces they had helped unleash. They wrote letters and made quiet pleas for peace, but their urgent truths were often drowned out by the louder, more comforting, gentle myth of eventual technical salvation. The blending of truth and myth also happened in schools. Children were taught civil defence drills, how to duck and cover under their desks if the bomb alarm sounded. This was a myth of control. The grim truth was that a desk would offer no real protection against a nuclear blast. But the ritual of the drill gave children and teachers a sense of action and purpose, which is a powerful antidote to helpless anxiety. This was a necessary psychological tool to manage the constant low-level dread that hung over every classroom. What this mixing shows us is that the mind sometimes needs a soft layer of fantasy to protect itself from extreme reality. It teaches us the difference between a harmful lie and a necessary gentle myth used for psychological protection. The fragile mind needs hope, and sometimes that hope must be wrapped in a story. This is not weakness. It is a profound act of mental self-preservation in the face of an impossible situation. This concept connects beautifully to the hidden forces we just discussed. The hidden forces were the lies and the fear, but the gentle myth was the small, private light that people used to keep their souls from total darkness. The ritual of the civil defence drill, though scientifically absurd, was a symbol of collective hope, a shared, quiet agreement to pretend that life could still go on. Tonight, let us embrace the most helpful and gentle myth of all, the myth of a perfect, undisturbed rest. Let the truth of your busy day fade into the background. Focus only on the soft rhythm of your breathing and the quiet promise of the dawn. Sleep now, and let the peaceful myths hold you steady until morning. See lines that cross. Many years. To truly understand the Cold War, we must see lines that cross many years. This tension did not start suddenly in 1945. It was the result of centuries of historical distrust between the West and Russia. These lines are deep and complex, representing different political systems, different religious histories, and different ideas about the role of the individual versus the state. The Cold War simply magnified these old existing fault lines into a global crisis. It showed how old wounds, left unhealed, can grow into massive sources of modern anxiety. One of the deepest lines was the historical fear of invasion and territorial control. For centuries, Russia had been invaded from the West, which created a deep national paranoia about borders and buffer states. This historical fact, the truth of vulnerability, was used by the Soviet government to justify its tight grip on Eastern Europe. For the West, the line represented the spread of communism, which they viewed as a threat to their entire way of life, including their economic freedom. These two competing ancient fears created a political and psychological gridlock. The Berlin airlift of 1948 is a rich example of these lines in action. The Soviet Union tried to cut off West Berlin, a small island of Western influence deep inside their territory. The American and British response was not military force, but a massive, sustained effort to fly supplies in day and night. This event proved that the line of division could be crossed not with tanks, but with quiet, relentless effort and logistical ingenuity. It was a psychological victory for the West, showing their commitment and resolve without starting a direct war. What tracing these historical lines teaches us is that global conflict is rarely random. It has deep roots. It shows the fragile mind that every present-day worry has a long, traceable history. Understanding these roots can help to reduce the chaotic feeling of the present. When we see the patterns of the past, we realise that the fear we feel now is simply the latest chapter in a very old, ongoing human story of difference and disagreement. The connection to the gentle myth is that the myth gave people a simple, comforting narrative, while the historical lines gave the conflict its complex, often terrifying truth. The lines that crossed the years were the hard, cold facts, the names, dates and geographic rivalries that the gentle myth tried to smooth over. But it is in facing the reality of these lines that we find a deeper, more grounded sense of peace. Let your mind see the long lines of history now, not as threats, but as quiet lessons. They have run their course, and they have led us to this moment of deep rest. There is great comfort in knowing that all conflicts, no matter how long, eventually lead to a quiet resolution. Sleep now, and let the lines of your worry straighten into a line of peaceful calm. Explain what the lines mean. Now, we must take the time to explain what the lines mean, not just where they were drawn, but the deep philosophical and psychological meaning behind them. The Western line stood for individualism, the belief that a single person's thoughts and wishes are the most important. The Eastern line stood for collectivism, the belief that the needs of the whole society, the collective group, are always more important than the needs of one person. This fundamental disagreement was the emotional core of the conflict, making it a true war of worldviews. The difference in these two ideas created a profound difference in daily life and anxiety. In the West, the fear was about losing freedom and being controlled by a distant large state. The anxiety was individual. Will I lose my job? Will I be poor? In the East, the fear was about standing out or making a mistake that could hurt the whole group. The social anxiety was collective. Will my actions bring trouble to my family or my town? Both lines created powerful psychological pressure on the citizens, but in completely different ways. The lines also meant a technological race. The Western ideal of constant competition drove massive innovation, leading to quick advancements in computers and communication. The Eastern ideal of centralised planning drove massive state-directed projects like the largest rockets and deepest scientific labs. This technological rivalry was not quiet. It produced constant media reports and propaganda, reminding people daily that the enemy was always trying to leap ahead. The fragile mind was constantly bombarded with images of technological superiority and inferiority, which fueled the existential dread. What explaining these lines shows us is that the Cold War was ultimately a conflict over the definition of happiness. Was happiness found in the freedom to choose your own path, or was it found in the security and equality of the group? The lines were not just borders on a map, they were divides within the human heart. They remind us that our most intense conflicts often stem from deeply held, but different beliefs about what it means to live a good and secure life. This is a beautiful connection to the historical lines from the last chapter. Those old lines were the geography of the fight. These new meanings are the psychology of the fight. Understanding the difference between individualism and collectivism helps us see that both sides were motivated by a desire for a peaceful, ordered world, but they chose completely opposite paths to get there. Let us quietly consider the meaning of these lines now, and then let them fade. Your own personal line is always shifting and changing. You can choose to find individual peace within a larger collective calm. Breathe slowly and let your mind relax from the old rigid arguments. Rest now and be at peace in the middle space between the two great ideas. Draw soft picture links. The Cold War was full of sharp edges and hard facts. To find peace, we must draw soft picture links, connections that show the shared humanity beneath the political surface. For example, think of two mothers on opposite sides of the wall, one in New York and one in Moscow. Both mothers taught their children to be good, to respect their elders, and to fear the other side's weapons. The fear was different, but the instinct to protect their young was exactly the same. This shared, ancient parental anxiety is a soft picture link that quietly defeats the loud propaganda of division. Another soft link is the shared need for music and art. Despite the intense political control, music from the West often found its way into the East, and vice versa. A simple rock and roll song could become an anthem for secret freedom in a controlled state. A famous Russian ballet could move audiences in the heart of America. These cultural exchanges were a powerful force, showing that the human desire for beauty and expression is a universal constant. Art and music became a quiet refuge for the fragile mind, a place where the lines and meanings of the war disappeared, if only for a few moments. The most profound picture link is the shared experience of existential dread. Every human on Earth during this time lived with the knowledge that the end could come not through natural disaster, but through human error or malice. This collective vulnerability created a quiet, unspoken bond across all borders. It was a terrible, shared secret that meant we were all fundamentally in the same boat. This shared psychological burden is a soft link that shows that the war was not between good and evil, but between fear and hope inside the human heart. What these soft picture links teach us is that empathy is the highest form of intelligence. The Cold War was an attempt to make people forget how much they had in common. The propaganda worked by magnifying differences. Our task now is to gently reverse that work by focusing on the quiet, universal feelings that connect us all. The tears of a worried parent, the joy of a good song, the fear of the dark. These are the things that are truly real. This connects gently to the old lines we just finished explaining. The lines were the things that divided the world into systems and philosophies. The soft picture links are the quiet, human truths that flow underneath those systems, often ignored by politicians but cherished by the people. These quiet truths are the ancient wisdom that tells us that love and fear are the two most powerful forces, and one is always struggling to overcome the other. Let your mind now draw its own soft picture link. Think of a peaceful connection between two things that seem far apart. Let the sharp edges of your day smooth out into a gentle, flowing line of rest. Close your eyes and let the soft picture of a universal human calm guide you towards sleep. Bring old pictures to today. We must now bring old pictures to today, not just as memories, but as lessons for our modern anxiety. Think of the old pictures of air raid drills, people with calm, slightly strained faces, following the rules, preparing for the worst. That level of collective, daily fear is hard to imagine now, but the underlying stress, the constant low-level worry about the future, is something we still know. The fragile mind of the Cold War era can teach us how to handle our own modern pressures, like the constant flow of unsettling news and digital uncertainty. One crucial old picture is the image of the family fallout shelter. These were small, often cramped rooms built in basements or backyards, stocked with canned food and water. This shelter was a physical symbol of their psychological defence. It was an attempt to take control of an uncontrollable situation. It was a quiet place where people could retreat, not just from the bomb, but from the overwhelming public anxiety. This act of personal preparation, even if inadequate, was essential for mental survival. Another picture is the image of the quiet ruin, the abandoned military base or the empty missile silo that still exists today. These ruins are physical scars on the landscape, reminders of the vast resources and emotional energy poured into the conflict. They are quiet monuments to the fear that passed. Seeing these places now helps to calm the modern mind, proving that even the most powerful, threatening forces can become still and harmless over time. They offer a deep, grounded sense of historical perspective. What bringing these pictures forward shows us is the human desire for a sense of control. The shelter was a way to make the vastness of the nuclear threat feel small and manageable. Our modern anxiety often comes from feeling out of control. The lesson from the past is to focus on the things we can prepare for, our own inner calm, our kindness to neighbours, our quiet pursuit of knowledge. These are the true psychological shelters that never fail. The soft connection to the picture links we just discussed is profound. The quiet family in the shelter, though isolated, was still connected by their love and shared fear, the soft picture link of humanity. They weren't just storing food, they were storing collective hope and mutual support. This reinforces the idea that true survival is always a matter of connection, not isolation. Let us now gently put the old pictures down. They have served their purpose by offering a lesson in resilience. Your body is now safe and warm. Let the history of that great, terrifying time recede like an old, quiet photograph. Rest now, and let your own inner resilience be your shelter for the night. Share the first clear revelations. There were moments in the Cold War when the gentle myth of control shattered, and the first clear revelations of reality broke through. The most intense of these was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. This was a terrifying 13 days when the world came closer to nuclear war than at any other time. The Soviet Union put missiles with nuclear warheads in Cuba, just 90 miles from the American shore. This was a direct threat that left no room for peaceful stories or historical distance. The fear was sharp, immediate, and all-consuming. The leaders of both sides, John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, suddenly faced the terrifying truth. Their massive arsenals were not just for show, they were ready to be used. This stark confrontation revealed the true nature of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. It was the chilling understanding that if one side launched, the other side would launch back, and both would be destroyed. The psychological effect of this realization was profound. The leaders had to find a way to step back from the edge, knowing that their own private anxiety was shared by billions of people. During those 13 days, the public was left with a horrible sense of powerlessness. People went about their daily lives, going to work, buying milk, while knowing that a single fast decision in a faraway room could end everything. The anxiety was almost too great to bear, leading many to feel a strange dreamlike calm, a psychological numbness that often happens when the mind is overwhelmed. This crisis showed that peace was not guaranteed by treaties, but by the fragile personal restraint of a few people. What this clear revelation teaches us is the absolute importance of communication, even under the greatest tension. The crisis was resolved only when a quiet, back-channel communication was opened between the two leaders. They had to look past the loud, public threats and talk to each other like two human beings desperate to avoid a catastrophe. This teaches us that when fear is highest, the simple, honest whisper of diplomacy is the most powerful tool we have. This connects powerfully to the old pictures of the shelters. In 1962, people rushed to these shelters, but they quickly realized the shelter was useless. The true shelter was the fragile connection between the leaders who were willing to listen to the other's fear. The moment of revelation showed them that the real threat was not the missile, but the failure of human empathy and dialogue. Let the intensity of that old dark time fade now. The quiet conversation worked, and the missiles were turned away. The lesson of the clear revelation is that even the greatest fear can be overcome with a simple, honest effort to understand. Rest now, and let the wisdom of history bring you a deep and unshakable calm. Lift eyes to quiet. Cosmic wonder. In the middle of the fear, humanity chose to lift eyes to quiet cosmic wonder. The space race, though driven by military competition, also produced a source of profound universal awe. When the first photographs of Earth from space arrived, they did something truly revolutionary to the fragile mind. They showed the Earth as a single, beautiful, fragile marble, a planet without borders, a shared home. This perspective change was a quiet, philosophical counterpoint to the intense political division. It offered a moment of existential peace above the conflict. The American mission to the moon in 1969, and the quiet words spoken there, were heard all over the world. This moment of collective human triumph transcended the Cold War rivalry. It was a reminder that when humanity focuses its vast energy on creation, not destruction, the results are boundless. The image of the blue Earth rising above the desolate moonscape became an iconic symbol, not of victory for one side, but of common vulnerability for all. It was a quiet revelation that the arguments on the ground were small compared to the vastness of the universe. This cosmic wonder became a form of psychological relief. By turning their attention to the stars, people could temporarily escape the tight grip of earthly paranoia. The moon was a symbol of clean, silent, untouched territory, a place where the old ideologies and the fixed lines of history did not apply. This provided a much-needed mental vacation from the daily stress and anxiety. It offered a quiet, profound hope that a shared future for the whole species was still possible if we could only look up together. What this lesson teaches us is the importance of perspective and scale. The Cold War was built on making differences seem huge and insurmountable. The cosmic wonder put the conflict into its proper, tiny scale. When you look at the entire planet as a single glowing dot, the arguments over one small piece of territory fade into insignificance. This is a powerful tool for the modern mind. When you feel overwhelmed, step back and look at the bigger picture of the cosmos. This connects softly to the clear revelations of the last chapter. The Cuban Missile Crisis gave us the terrifying truth of the planet's fragility. The view from space gave us the beautiful truth of its unity. Both were necessary for the mind to begin seeking peace. The moon landing was a quiet, shared nod between the rival empires that said, "We are capable of great things, and we must choose to do the great thing of surviving." Let us now lift our own eyes to that quiet wonder. Let the vastness of the cosmos surround you, not with coldness, but with a sense of quiet order and peace. You are part of something unimaginably vast and beautiful. Rest now, and let your own anxieties feel small against the eternal silence of the stars. Watch history repeat in soft circles. If we look closely at history, we can watch history repeat in soft circles. The Cold War was not a unique event. It was the modern expression of an ancient tension, the human fear of the other and the constant temptation to divide the world into us and them. The quiet paranoia of the 1950s was just like the witch trials of the 1600s, where suspicion and accusation became the most dangerous weapons. The cycles are soft, not sharp, because the details change, but the core psychological dynamics of fear and control remain the same. Another repeating circle is the arms race. Every empire in history, from the Romans to the British, has tried to build the biggest, strongest weapon to guarantee peace. But history shows that this always leads to the enemy building an even bigger weapon, creating an endless spiral of fear. The Cold War's nuclear arms race was simply the deadliest version of this old, predictable human mistake. The anxiety was built into the system, a quiet engine of dread that ran day and night, constantly demanding more resources and more fear. The most hopeful repeating circle is the rise of dissent and peace movements. In every historical period of tyranny and fear, there has always been a quiet, courageous resistance from artists, writers, and ordinary people demanding peace. During the Cold War, this included massive protests, but also small, quiet acts of defiance, like publishing forbidden poetry or sharing a banned book. These movements prove that the human heart has an instinct for peace that repeats in a soft, steady cycle, no matter how loud the war drums beat. What watching these circles teaches us is that our fears are not new, and neither is our capacity for resilience. The fragile mind can be comforted by the knowledge that this tension too shall pass. When you see a pattern, you can predict its end. The cycle of fear is followed by the cycle of exhaustion and negotiation. This historical perspective gives us a deep, grounded calm, because it shows that every great crisis in history eventually resolves into a period of quiet reflection. This connects gently to the cosmic wonder of the last chapter. The repeating circles of history are like the predictable orbits of the planets, a terrifying but ultimately ordered pattern. The quiet knowledge of this order is a powerful antidote to the fear of chaos. We know that the darkness will not last forever, because the light always returns in its own soft, reliable circle. Let us allow these soft historical circles to complete their spin now. Let the ancient fears and the old arguments fade into a smooth, continuous line of rest. Your worries are not unique. They are part of a very old pattern that is now ending for the night. Sleep deeply, and let the calm cycle of rest wash over you. Open doors to hidden knowledge. We now open doors to hidden knowledge, exploring the deep science that made the Cold War so terrifying. At the heart of the conflict was physics, the study of how the universe works. The invention of the hydrogen bomb was not just a military feat. It was a profound philosophical crisis. Scientists discovered how to harness the power of the sun itself, bringing the ultimate cosmic force down to Earth. This hidden knowledge of how to achieve total annihilation was a terrible burden, creating a psychological abyss of responsibility and dread for those who understood it. The creation of the ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles, introduced the concept of global reach for destruction. These rockets were capable of launching from deep within one continent and landing on another, traversing vast distances in minutes. This fact eliminated the concept of geographic safety. No one was truly safe anymore. The military minds had to develop complex game theories and nuclear strategy, calculating the likelihood of destruction based on mathematical models. This cold, algorithmic approach to mass death was one of the most chilling aspects of the Fragile Mind era. The hidden knowledge also involved the science of propaganda and social engineering. Governments studied mass psychology to find the most effective ways to manage the fear and maintain public anxiety at a controllable level. They understood that constant low-level dread made people more obedient and less likely to question authority. They used subtle messages, media control, and soft symbols to shape the public narrative. This knowledge showed that the war was not just fought with rockets, but with a deep understanding of the human mind's weaknesses. What this deep science shows us is the constant struggle between human ingenuity and human morality. Our capacity to understand the universe is vast, but our capacity to wisely manage that power is often small. The psychological lesson is that true power lies not in building the biggest bomb, but in the moral restraint to never use it. The quiet scientists who fought for arms control were the true heroes, using their knowledge to prevent rather than provoke disaster. This connects profoundly to the repeating cycles of history. The discovery of fire was a great step forward for humanity, but it also created the power to destroy a village. The discovery of the atom was the ultimate step, creating the power to destroy the world. The lesson remains the same. New power requires old wisdom. The soft answers always lie in the moral code, not the scientific formula. Let us now gently close the doors of hidden knowledge. The immense power is now a quiet fact of history, contained and regulated. Let the complexity of the science fade into a simple, quiet understanding that power is best left at rest. Sleep now, and let your own vast, beautiful mind be at peace. Reach a peaceful high point. The Cold War was a long, anxious climb, but it eventually reached a peaceful high point. This peak was not a moment of sudden victory, but a slow, quiet realization that the fear could not last forever. This moment came with the signing of the first arms limitation treaties, which began in the late 1960s. These treaties were long, complicated documents, but their meaning was simple. We agree to stop building more of the terrifying weapons. This was a profound shift in the global mind, moving from maximum preparation to mutual restraint. This high point was a psychological triumph because it required both sides to finally trust, just a little, that the other side was equally afraid of total destruction. The shift was driven by exhaustion and anxiety. The cost of the arms race was too high, not just in money, but in the emotional toll on the citizens and the leaders themselves. The existential dread had become unbearable, forcing both empires to choose sanity over escalation. It was a victory for the fragile mind that simply wanted to rest. One of the most powerful symbols of this high point was the opening of cultural dialogue and the relaxing of travel restrictions. Simple things like American tourists walking quietly through Red Square or Soviet artists visiting New York began to happen more frequently. These small human moments were more effective than any treaty in reducing the paranoia and suspicion. It is hard to hate an enemy when you are quietly sharing a cup of coffee with them. These were the quiet human revelations that helped to dismantle the psychological wall. What this peaceful high point teaches us is that resolution is not always found in strength but in shared vulnerability. When both sides admit that they are equally afraid, they can finally find a way forward. The slow climb down from the peak of fear requires patience, quiet negotiation, and a deep breath. It reminds us that peace is a process, not a destination, built on small, careful steps away from the edge. This connects gently to the hidden knowledge we just talked about. The scientists who understood the true terror of the bomb were often the ones who pushed the hardest for the treaties. Their knowledge and their fear were the powerful forces that finally propelled humanity toward this quiet peak. The truth they carried was simply too heavy to ignore forever. Let your mind now rest at this high point. The long, hard climb is over, and the view is quiet and peaceful. Feel the simple relief of knowing that the worst has passed. Sleep now, and let your own breath become the slow, steady rhythm of global peace. Close with soothing answers. We have travelled through a landscape of deep fear, and now we must close with soothing answers. The main answer to the Cold War's anxiety is this: the human spirit is built for survival. Despite the threats of nuclear fire, hidden spies, and crippling paranoia, people found a way to live, to love, and to create. This deep resilience is the ultimate truth of the era. The fragile mind was not broken. It simply learned to bend and adapt to the pressure, finding small, quiet pockets of peace within the chaos. One soothing answer comes from the concept of détente, a French word meaning the relaxing of tension. It was the period when the two empires realised they could not win the war, but they could learn to manage the peace. This meant coexistence, living side by side, not as friends, but as neighbours who agree to disagree quietly. This taught the world that perfect trust is not required for peace. Sometimes, a simple, mutual self-interest in survival is enough. This pragmatic approach was a great relief to the psychological burden of perpetual conflict. Another answer lies in the slow, quiet power of information. The invention of new media, like personal computers and the early internet, began to bypass the official propaganda channels. When people could finally share their own stories, their own unfiltered truths, the power of the empires to control the narrative began to crumble. This showed that the most powerful weapon against ideological fear is the free flow of genuine human experience. It dissolved the false image of the enemy and allowed for real empathy to grow. What these soothing answers show us is the power of a slow, peaceful resolution. The Cold War did not end with a bang or a single victory parade. It ended with a quiet, gentle exhale. This teaches us that the best way to handle intense personal anxiety is not to fight it aggressively, but to slowly, patiently reduce the tension until it finally fades away. The quiet persistence of peace-seeking hearts eventually overcame the loud shouts of fear. This connects profoundly to the peaceful high point of the treaties. The treaties were the official agreements. The soothing answers were the internal psychological agreements made by billions of people who were tired of being afraid. They chose to believe in the possibility of tomorrow rather than the certainty of destruction. Let these soothing answers wrap around you now like a soft blanket. The long, difficult story is coming to a close. All the tension and the fear that you have listened to is now just history. Let your mind become completely quiet and deeply secure. Rest now in the confidence of human resilience. The soft sound of anxiety. Ending. The end of the Cold War did not come with a loud crash, but with the soft sound of anxiety ending. This moment is best symbolised by the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. It was not destroyed by an army, it was gently dismantled by people. The quiet sounds of chipping concrete and the joyful shouts of reunited families were the final, beautiful noise of the great fear receding. The physical wall was a symbol of terror, and its quiet, peaceful collapse was the ultimate psychological release for millions who had lived under the shadow of division for decades. This psychological decompression was felt worldwide. Suddenly, the great, terrifying villain was gone from the daily news, and the existential dread that had been a constant companion began to fade. This was a unique moment of collective relief, showing the world what happens when a shared, decades-long fear is finally removed. People began to talk more openly, to travel more freely, and to plan for a future that no longer contained the single, overwhelming threat of total annihilation. The shift was often subtle. The deep science that once went into building bombs was slowly redirected toward climate change and disease control. The spy satellites that once watched armies were used to monitor forests and weather patterns. This redirection of human ingenuity was a huge part of the anxiety ending. It showed that the immense power the empires had built could be transformed from a force of destruction into a tool for global cooperation and environmental peace. What this soft sound teaches us is the quiet power of human persistence. The tension was long and heavy, but the simple, unyielding desire of people for freedom and safety eventually won. The quiet, daily acts of resistance, the small glowing runes of hope, built up over time until they became an irresistible force. It proves that the greatest victories are often the most quiet, achieved by patience and peaceful pressure. This connects beautifully to the soft picture links we drew earlier. The picture of the two mothers, one in New York, one in Moscow, was a dream of peace for decades. When the wall fell, those mothers, or their children, could finally meet, no longer separated by the paranoia of empire. The soft sound of the anxiety ending was the sound of those human connections finally being made real. Let your own anxiety now make a soft sound as it fades away. Hear the quiet in your room, and let your body sink deeper into the simple reality of rest. The long, cold night is over, and your mind is free from the ancient worry. Sleep peacefully now, as the gentle sounds of peace surround you. Our brains and hidden stress. The Cold War was a massive experiment in long-term stress, and we must now look at our brains and hidden stress. Decades of living under the shadow of the bomb changed the collective human mind. Scientists learned that constant low-level fear, the feeling of existential dread, can put the brain in a state of chronic alert. This constant readiness for disaster is mentally exhausting and leads to high levels of anxiety and psychological burnout. The body and mind were always prepared for a sprint that never came, leaving them perpetually tired. The science of trauma shows that uncertainty is one of the most damaging factors to the mind. The Cold War was pure uncertainty. No one knew if tomorrow would bring a treaty or a bomb. This lack of certainty meant the fragile mind could never fully relax. It was like trying to sleep in a house where you constantly hear a tiny, unsettling sound. The brain's fear center, the amygdala, was constantly on high alert, making people jumpy, easily suspicious, and prone to paranoia. This is the hidden health cost of the era. However, the brain also showed remarkable adaptability and resilience. To cope with the stress, many people unconsciously developed a powerful ability to compartmentalize, to put the huge, terrifying global worry into one quiet room of their mind and close the door, allowing them to focus on the small, manageable tasks of daily life. This psychological defense was a necessary skill for survival. It allowed them to find small moments of genuine peace amidst the constant global tension. What this study of the brain shows us is that true rest is not a luxury. It is a vital part of mental survival. The people who navigated the Cold War best were often those who had strong inner routines and peaceful rituals, a quiet cup of tea, a walk in the park, a simple garden. These acts of intentional calm were the brain's way of fighting back against the manufactured stress. They were the small, glowing runes of sanity that kept the light alive. This connects profoundly to the soft sound of anxiety ending. The end of the war was the moment the brain could finally turn down the volume on the constant high-pitched alarm. The sudden quiet was a healing balm for the nervous system, allowing the deepest parts of the mind to finally feel safe for the first time in decades. Let your own hidden stress now be released. Feel your brain understand that the time for vigilance is over, and the time for deep restorative rest has begun. Let your breathing slow down and deepen. Sleep now, and allow your entire being to enter a state of profound, unburdened calm. The gentle power of shared peace. The final years of the Cold War reveal the gentle power of shared peace. This power was not held by presidents or generals. It was held by the ordinary people who simply chose kindness and connection over fear and hatred. One of the most important moments was the quiet, non-governmental diplomacy that blossomed in the 1980s. Citizens from the East and West meeting secretly, talking about their lives, their children, and their simple dreams for a world without tension. These were small, personal treaties of the heart. This era saw a surge in global humanitarian efforts, organizations dedicated to solving problems that transcended the two empires, like hunger and health. By focusing on shared human problems, people found a common cause that was much larger than the ideological argument. This work was a powerful form of psychological healing, as it allowed people to redirect their energy from anxious fear to active hope. It created a sense of global citizenship that quietly undermined the sharp, fixed lines of the political map. The gentle power was also evident in the leadership. Leaders like Mikhail Gorbachev made the courageous choice to look past the old rigid fears and to trust the genuine desire for peace. His policy of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, was an admission that the old ways were unsustainable. This official openness was a massive psychological relief, allowing the collective mind of the East to finally exhale and admit the need for change. His actions proved that the most powerful thing a leader can do is to be humble and honest. What this gentle power shows us is that peace is not an accident. It is a deliberate, quiet choice. It requires individuals to consciously choose empathy over suspicion and connection over isolation. The fragile mind found strength in the simple realization that the official enemy was just another person who loved their family and worried about money. The shared peace was built one quiet conversation at a time, proving that the most effective political action is often the most personal. This connects softly to the hidden stress we just explored. The shared peace was the ultimate antidote to chronic fear. When people realized they were united by a common desire for survival, their individual stress began to dissolve. The burden became lighter when it was shared, showing that the true path to mental calm is through human solidarity. Let the gentle power of shared peace surround you now. Feel the quiet connection to everyone who desires a simple, peaceful night. You're not alone in seeking rest and safety. Sleep now, and let the strong, quiet bond of humanity hold you securely in the dark. Lessons from the long chill. We have nearly completed our journey, and we must gather the lessons from the long chill. The most important lesson is this: suspicion is the most powerful weapon. The Cold War proved that fear of the unknown, fueled by propaganda, can paralyze societies, ruin lives, and cost trillions without a single bomb ever being dropped. The psychological war, the war waged on the fragile mind, was far more sustained and costly than any physical war. The lesson is to always question the source of your fear and to actively seek truth and transparency as a defense. Another crucial lesson is the resilience of private life. No matter how intense the global tension, the simple, quiet activities of daily life, raising children, eating dinner, celebrating birthdays, continued. These small rituals of normalcy were the quiet bedrock that prevented the global anxiety from leading to total breakdown. They were the constant, soft picture links that humanity clung to. This teaches us that the best defense against existential dread is to live fully in the present moment, cherishing the simple, immediate reality of your own life. The final lesson is the power of the quiet ending. The Cold War did not end with a declaration, but with a gradual dissolution, a slow, patient erosion of fear and distance. This teaches us that our own problems, even the ones that feel massive and permanent, often end the same way. They fade with time, persistence, and a quiet shift in perspective. The lesson is to trust in the process of slow, gentle change, and to not demand a sudden, dramatic resolution. What these lessons from the chill show us is a path to a more peaceful mind. By recognizing the patterns of historical anxiety, we can disarm our own modern fears. We learn that external chaos does not have to equal internal chaos. We can choose to be the quiet observer of the storm, rather than the frantic participant. This is the ultimate psychological mastery learned from the long, cold tension. This connects profoundly to the gentle power of shared peace. The lessons could only be learned when the people chose to share them, realizing that their individual experience of fear was not unique. By exchanging their quiet, personal histories, they transformed a global nightmare into a universal teaching moment. Let these lessons from the long chill settle into your mind now. They are not heavy burdens, but soft, guiding lights. Your own journey through life has given you great resilience and deep wisdom. Rest now, and let your mind absorb the deep, unshakable calm of having faced and survived the shadow. Rest now, the shadow is gone. We have reached the end of the long night. The final chapter is a simple instruction. Rest now, the shadow is gone. The great tension that held the world in its grip for decades has receded into the history books. The loud voices of fear are quiet, and the deep anxieties of that time are now just stories. Allow your mind to accept this profound, simple truth. The world you rest in tonight is safer and quieter because of the immense effort of millions who chose peace over paranoia. The final soothing answer is that the fragile mind survived the ultimate test. It endured the threat of annihilation and emerged with greater wisdom. This knowledge should bring you a deep and unshakable sense of security. If humanity could navigate that darkness and find the path to light, then you too can find your way through any worry that rests in your heart. You possess the genetic memory of resilience, the quiet strength that outlasts the loudest fear. Let us close with the ultimate picture link, the image of the world now, bathed in a soft, peaceful glow. The old lines and divisions are still visible on maps, but they are not the only truth. The greater truth is the vast interconnected web of human life, quietly going about the beautiful ordinary business of living. This is the final, most powerful lesson, that life's simplicity is the strongest defense against its chaos. What this final chapter truly asks is for intentional, deep relaxation. We have looked at the history of fear to purge it from our present. Now is the moment to fully release the tension. Let your mind become a quiet ruin, a beautiful ancient place where the work is done, the lessons are learned, and only the gentle, golden light of rest remains. This is the ultimate connection to the very first glow we talked about in the caves. The first light was the simple light of fire for warmth. This final light is the gentle light of wisdom and settled peace. Both lights serve the same purpose, to push back the darkness and allow for quiet, deep rest. Rest now. The history is told, the worries are gone, and only peace remains. Sleep deeply, sweetly, and securely until the morning comes. Now that the story is done, breathe deep and let the final bits of tension leave your body. You have carried the weight of a huge history, and you have learned the strength of the human mind. Take this quiet strength with you. Share this feeling of deep historical calm with someone you care about. When you wake up, share this soft story with a friend who needs a peaceful rest. The shadow of the great chill has passed, and your mind is safe now. The world did not end with a loud bang. It found its way to a soft answer through quiet human choice. The greatest battles are fought not with armies, but in the fragile mind, and in those quiet wars human kindness always finds a way to win. The story of fear is over, and the story of deep peace is just beginning for you. We are left with just one lingering question. What quiet strength will you discover in yourself when you are truly, deeply at rest?